Right, we're live on YouTube. Hi Lee, can you hear me okay?
Very good.
Hi CG, how's it going? Right, we'll get going in a few minutes guys.
Okay,
We're just waiting for 7 o'clock.
That's right. That's quite good, George. This I thought was for a copy.
Eh?
This I thought was for a copy.
Is it?
You guys are being broadcast live.
DLT is nice man. Slightly tips.
Welcome everybody to this live stream. We're just setting up the Facebook feed as well, so we'll get going now in a minute. Can everyone hear me okay and see the picture?
Hello.
No. No, wait, I can't sleep. Oh, there's 6. That's not bad.
Hi John, it's nice to see you here. Hope you enjoy this. You need to change that N for narrow gauge tonight, John. Are we good for Facebook?
Yes, we are. I'm just listening. Bring it up in a second. That's okay. Yeah.
Right, you're all very welcome to the Donegal Railway Heritage Centre. As part of Heritage Week, we are doing a little talk about the history of the Donegal Railways. So let's get started. So County Donegal Railways, a brief history. There we can see on the map there the extent of the railways in the county. It totaled 225 miles altogether, made up of the Swilly Railway and the County Donegal Railway. We're looking at the County Donegal Railway tonight, which is 125 miles, which span from Derry to Strabane to Stranorlar on to Donegal with a branch down to Ballyshannon and off to Killybegs. It was a narrow gauge system, 3-foot gauge. Predominantly towards the end it was running diesel rail cars. So where did it all begin? So the County Donegal Railway started as the Finn Valley Railway, with the first stretch built in 1863, which was initially built as a standard gauge from Strabane to Stranorlar. The landlords, Viscount Lifford and Samuel Hayes, wanted the benefit of a railway system in Donegal, as Strabane already had a railway system from 1947. So that opened up in 1863. From then on, they started the West Donegal Railway, which then looked at extending the railway from Stranorlar to Donegal Town, which it reached the town eventually in 1889, after stopping for 7 years at Loch Station when they ran out of money, which was 4 miles outside the town in 1882. You then had to get a horse and carriage for 6pence for the last 4 miles into the town. Very quickly after that then, thanks to an Act of Parliament that was encouraging rural railways in Ireland and the UK, they started opening up further branches. So they then developed into the CDR. So we'll have a look now at some of the branches. So there's the Finn Valley Sewell, which was the first railway. They issued around 70,000 shares and a loan of 20,000 to build the railway. And there we can see the route, starting in Strabane over on the far right, following the River Finn into Stranorlar. Here we see Strabane Station, which was the main station where it interacted with the Great Northern Railway, which was the standard gauge railway. Here we can see an overlay of where the station once was. Now it is an Asda and a shopping centre. So you can see quite a station. Here we have Castlefin Station, which was the first station you came to after leaving Strabane for Stranorlar. You can see this is taken in 1910. Castlefin has the unusual, it has two names. So on one side of the station you can see Castlefin here is spelt with two N's on the end. On the other side it was only spelt with one N. And nobody is sure why Castlefin spells its name like this. Even to this day now, when you take the road into Castlefin, it is actually spelt two different ways on either side of the road. Killygordon was the next station. You can see here it's quite a bustling station. This is in the 1920s. And here we have an aerial shot of Stranorlar Station, there in the bottom of the picture. This was the main administration headquarters for the railway. You can see the line going off there, straight off along the river is the Glenties branch, and the branch to Donegal curves off to the left. So here is the seal for the West Donegal Railway, which came into being in 1879 and granted the power to build a 3-foot gauge into Donegal town. Here you can see the route they take, so starting the top right there from Stranorlar. It follows all the way in to Donegal. Now it only got as far as Locomotive Station, which is just about here, in 1882 when they ran out of money, and it took another 7 years to reach the town. Here we have Blanche pulling one of her expresses through the gap. And here's a lovely shot of it heading into the gap. This is heading towards Stranorlar. And that is along the ledge now that is still visible in Barnes Gap today. You can see the coaching stock it has, they're all sorts of different sizes. They weren't corridor connected, so once you were in your carriage that was it until you got to your destination. Here we have one of the halts which were common along the routes. There's even a halt out near where I live. It was just built by the locals at the time. They all got together and decided they didn't want to walk a quarter of a mile down to the other halt, so they built one themselves. Here's Barnes Halt again. And here we can see Railcar 16 and Trailer 2. This is Locomotive Station, which was the original terminus for the line. It would have had a passing loop at the time. And here's Donegal town. Now we have a little video clip here of trains coming in and out of the town. So this looks like Railcar 12 coming into the town. You can see it's pulling a couple of grey wagons, which is common for these rail cars to pull, so they carry a small amount of freight. There's the station sign, which we have up in our museum. The rail cars only had one reverse gear, so at every station they serviced, there had to be a turntable to turn them around to carry on their journey back. And then we have the signal box. And this looks like Railcar 18, probably coming up from Ballyshannon. And you see the man on the left is about to hand over the staff. That will be the signalman handing it over to the driver. You can see it's actually pulling one of the red wagons, which is a lighter construction. These came from the Clogher Valley Railway when it closed. Now you can see these wagons are freewheeling, something that wouldn't be allowed today. And I suspect that the rail car behind it gave them a nudge just to get them going down the line. And here we have them on the turntable, getting ready to send 18 back down to Ballyshannon. This would have been taken in about the mid-1950s. I'm not sure if those two are having a bit of a disagreement. So that's some of the movements that were a daily occurrence here at the station in Donegal town. So the Donegal Railway Company was then set up to start building the extensions under the government acts. So the Killybegs branch opened up in 1893. Again, starting in Donegal, the far right, following the coast along till it got to Killybegs. Killybegs would have been a major fishing port, so a lot of the fish products would have come in and be transported by train further afield. Here we can see Mina Glass sitting at the station in Killybegs. Railcar 20, which are now on the Isle of Man, along with its sister 19. And here we can see the inside of the station. Again, another little clip.
We'll first of all see the distance signal for the station, and after that, on the left, the engine shed comes into view with the first set of points for the sidings. The engine shed was in fact demolished by Loco Column Kill running into its end wall shortly after this film was taken. More recently, all signs of the railway here have been obliterated by a combination of land reclamation and the construction of fish factories. Killybegs Station was fashioned into a comparatively tight space between the main street and the shoreline, hence the curve on the platform you've just seen. It was the only one of all the narrow gauge stations in Donegal that had a full overall roof or train shed, supposedly to protect passengers from the combination of rain and gales. At the far end of this shed was the water tower, which was positioned exactly where the rear terrace of the pier bar before its own demolition in late 2002. We see Railcar 19, having dropped off its passengers, inching along beside the water tower onto the turntable. You can actually see the square axle box holes in the girder frames that form the table itself, and these were the frames of an earlier CDR steam locomotive, scrapped some years before, with the parts being re-employed as usefully as possible, a very typical approach by the management of the CDR. The railway staff then turned the railcar by hand, and there was very little room to spare. In fact, the curve in the wall forming the north side of the turntable area was still in place behind a dual telephone kiosk until late 2002, but sadly nothing else exists of the station buildings themselves, the station having been demolished around 1980 and the last traces of the goods shed removed in the mid-1990s. The driver who brought railcar number 19 into Killybegs was Mickey Lafferty. The man in the long coat helping turn the railcar is Tommy Kenny, a railcar guard. His sister Mary was a supervisor in the Killybegs carpet factory, which we shall see in a moment. The other man in the long coat standing ready to lock the turntable into place is Cathal Kennedy, a driver who is about to take over and bring Railcar 19 back to Donegal town. According to Joe Curran, the son of B.L. Curran, the general manager of the railway at the time of this film, we can safely assume that Railcar 19 has just done the round trip to Strabane, having left Killybegs at 7:45 a.m. and set off back from Strabane at 11:20 a.m. to arrive at Killybegs at 2:35 p.m. So the first driver of the day would be just about to go off duty.
Sorry about that, you should be able to hear me now. Here's the network that we once had in Ireland. You can see how you could have got a train here in Donegal and gone anywhere in the country by train. We'll have a look later at what's actually left of our network. We're going to have a look now at the various rail cars that were on the system. Donegal was very pioneering in the use of the combustion engine on the railways. Here's the one that started it all, Railcar number 1, 1906. Originally this was an open car, and somebody looked at it and thought, you know, we could use that to carry people. So they enclosed it, and away it went, carrying about 6 passengers. And it continued in service until the railway closed in 1959. So they carried on developing the idea of using rail cars. Here we have the first versions of Railcar 2 and 3. And these were scrapped in 1934. These were petrol, 22 horsepower. Here's the second version of Railcar number 2. This carried on from 1934 to 1944, when it was then, the engine was taken off it and it was just converted into a trailer. And likewise with the second Railcar 3. You can see gradually the technology was developing. We were gradually getting bigger. Here we have Railcar 6. Railcar 7 and 8. Now these are iconic because these are the first diesel-powered locomotion on railways in the British Isles. So this is the first time a diesel combustion engine has been used on the rails anywhere in the UK or Ireland. And these came in the 1930s. Railcar 9. There was 2 versions of Railcar 10. This is the earlier version. And then this is its replacement. Here's the only diesel shunter that the Donegal Railway owned. Originally it was a steam powered. They took that out and they converted it to diesel. And this could be seen shunting around in Stranorlar and Strabane. Railcar 12. Again, you can see the development of the rail cars as they're getting bigger. These are using Gardner diesel engines now. They're a lot more powerful and capable of pulling a couple of wagons as well. Railcar 14. 15, which is actually, we're actually sitting in the body of Railcar 15 at the moment, which has been brought back to the museum here and restored. Here we have 16. Unfortunately, there's very few photos of 17 because it was involved in a fatal accident not far from the station here in 1949, in which the driver and 2 passengers were killed. It had left the station without the staff and had met the oncoming goods train from Ballyshannon, and a steam train and a wooden rail car. There's no match. Here we have 18, which is still in use today and is on the Fintown Railway. And we have 19 and 20, which after the railway closed were sold to the Isle of Man, and they're currently in storage on the Isle of Man waiting restoration. We'll have a look at the steam engines now that ran on the Donegal Railway. First we got a little video for those who don't know how a steam engine works.
How do steam locomotives work? With the invention of the commercial steam engine starting the Industrial Revolution, these icons of progress made travel and transportation by rail a viable option, cutting travel times and connecting communities. Here's a somewhat simplified steam locomotive. With many trains of this era, the boiler is clearly distinguishable. A steam locomotive needs water and fuel, usually coal, carrying them either on the locomotive itself or in a tender pulled behind. The fuel is used to run a fire inside the engine, burning inside what's called the firebox. The fire is managed by the fireman in the cab who, along with the driver, is needed to run the steam locomotive. The firebox sucks air from underneath the train to keep the fire from starving. The solid fuel sits on top of grates, through which dead ash can fall down into the ash pan. The firebox allows heat and smoke to escape the chamber through the so-called fire tubes, running the length of the boiler. The boiler wraps around the firebox and fire tubes, thus heating the water inside to boiling point, creating steam. As more and more water evaporates, steam builds up inside the boiler, creating pressure. Inside the steam dome, the steam can find a way out of the boiler towards the cylinders. In case the pressure becomes too high and the boiler risks exploding, a safety valve pops to relieve pressure. The amount of steam exiting the boiler is controlled using the regulator valve. This is effectively the throttle of the steam locomotive. Because as the steam runs down to the cylinders, we get to the part that actually drives the wheels. There are two sets of cylinders, one set on each side of the train. Steam engines on steam locomotives are so-called reciprocating piston engines. Each set has one cylinder with a piston, connected to the driving rod, which in turn is connected to the driving wheel, which can be connected to the other wheels. The other cylinder contains the slide valve, which allows fresh steam to enter and used steam to exhaust from the piston cylinder. This way, the piston is pushed once from both sides to complete one rotation, creating that reciprocating motion, which is then used to rotate the drive wheel. The steam, now done with its job, exits towards the smoke box, where it joins any smoke coming off the firebox to escape out the chimney.
There we go, a simplified view of how a steam engine works. So here's the first steam engine that came to the Donegal Railway. These were a 240 tank engines. All the engines that came to Donegal were all tank engines. The first engines, they had the class 1s, 2s and 3s. They weren't particularly powerful, and quite often they had to be double heading. So we can here see that class 2, slightly bigger, but again, not a very powerful engine. Here we have the class 3, getting bigger, but still slightly underpowered for the terrain that's in Donegal. And we have the class 4, which a lot of these were in service onto the end of the railway. And then we come to class 5, of which one Drumbo is one, which is the engine that we're restoring and bringing back here to the centre. And then the 5A. The 5A was different as it just had bigger water tanks, and some of them may have been superheated. So what do the railways do for us? If you notice this clock here, it's got 2 minute hands on it, because before the railways came along, all time was local. So you can see here, this is actually a clock from that's on the Corn Market in Bristol. And you can see one is 10 minutes ahead of the other. So one is showing London time and the other is showing Bristol time. Now you can imagine 10 minutes difference between two stations when you're travelling from London to Bristol would make timetables very confusing. So this is how we ended up with standardised time across the British Isles. It just made timetables a lot easier, because when you were looking at the time that the train was leaving at and arriving at, was it local or was it London time? And here you can see what's left of our railway network in Ireland compared to what we had. So the map on the left was in 1906 and isn't even complete because there was more railways added after that. But then thanks to the governments in Belfast, which were in the 50s were hell-bent of getting rid of the railways, we lost all our railways in Northern Ireland. So this left us here in Donegal, which is in the far northwest, completely cut off from the rest of the country. Partition didn't help us because it meant a train going across the border had to go through customs. This guy here, Henry Forbes, this was some man. This was the manager of the railways up until 1943 when he died. He was a very frugal man. He's kept the railways going for so long. He was the one who brought in the railcars and carried on with their development. It said the staff had a very healthy fear of him. He was the Michael O'Leary of his day, if you like. There's a tale of during the War of Independence in 1920. He was heading home and he was on the train, and for some reason the train was being held up in Drumbar Halt. And he thought this is taking too long. He looked out the window and he seen the IRA holding up the train driver, because quite often the IRA would stop the trains to get information. So he seen this, he pulled his revolver, he went up the other side of the train, hopped into the engine, started firing shots at these young IRA men. They legged it. He started chasing them across the field. He grabbed one of them, dragged them back to the train, into the engine, ordered the driver to reverse back to Donegal, which he did. He then got out of the station looking for a policeman, holding this young IRA man with a gun at his head. Couldn't find one, and took him to Stranraer, where he found a policeman and got him arrested. So he was quite a fearful man. And it said when he was actually had that gun to the IRA man's head, there was actually no bullets left in it. And when they were renovating the station house in the 60s, after he died, his office was locked up. Nobody went near it. But when they were renovating the station in the 60s, they found the very revolver in his desk, which has since disappeared, because when it was found, it was handed into the local Garda Síochána, who would have disposed of it. But this man's legacy lives on through his grandson, Graham Forbes, and his great-granddaughter, Tara, who through their generous donation to us here at the centre have enabled us to bring Drumbo home. So she will be returning to the station here in January, all being well. And we'll have a look at these are the plans we have made out for the centre here. You can see she's going to be undercover and protected from the elements. This is the first phase of, we're hopefully leading to a second phase where we will put her back into steam. So we'll get her home here, then we'll look at the second phase of having somewhere to run her. So that completes the presentation. So thanks for coming along. I hope you enjoyed that. If you've any questions, you can put them into the chat now and I'll answer them. And if there's any questions from the floor. But I think the people we have here watching know all the history and probably know it better than I do.
Questions later.
Any questions? Mark, I suppose I can ask a question. When are you hoping to have the work complete for Drumbo here?
Hopefully it will be around February time. I was talking to the builders today and they will be on site in mid-September to do the groundworks to build the new platform and start erecting the canopy. The works on Drumbo itself is starting in September up in Whitehead in Bristol, and should be ready by Christmas, all being well.
And wasn't it Drumbo that was the last engine to run at 1959, was it?
It was the last engine to run. It left Stranraer, came to Donegal, went back again, and that was the last engine to run. Now there are a few stories about when it officially closed. There was two guys who were still running the rail car from Ballyshannon to Donegal for 2 months before the powers that be discovered this and shut them down. There's a lot of stories and folklore with the Donegal because it really was a community railway. People used it for getting to work, getting to school. Quite often people would leave the town here on the rail car, head out to Barnesmore Gap to go to the bog to cut turf. The rail car would slow down, they would hop off, do their day in the bog. Rail car coming back in the evening, they would hop on and come back into town maybe with a creel full of turf on their back. There's also a nice story here about Shep the dog, who every evening would catch the 5 o'clock train out to Moncharles, get off at Moncharles, go and do whatever he was going to do, and when the train was returning from Killybegs, he'd be there waiting for the train, hop back onto it, and come back to the town. Now everybody seemed to think that Shep had some sort of girlfriend in Moncharles, and he was going off there every day to see her.
What's his dog ticket?
And finally, Mark's going to ask, is there an opportunity if people want to support the work of Drumbo that they can do through the website or what?
There is. I've been putting links in the chats here to say, you know, every donation is gratefully received. We still have a couple of thousand we still need to raise to finish off the works. Thanks to the DLDC and Leader here in Donegal, they have given us a grant, which is a substantial amount towards it. And again, thanks to Graham and Tara Forbes, with their donation, has really helped us get this off the ground. Right, I'll end the stream there. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found that informative. And if you're new here, please subscribe.
Do you like my questions?
Oh, you're very good.
Mark, that was very good.